The Special Fathers Network is thrilled to be sponsored by Rubin Law, a multi-generational law firm dedicated exclusively to serving families raising children with special needs. It's not one thing they do, it's the only thing they do. To find out more, go to rubinlaw.com, RUBIN law.com, or call 847-279-7999 and mention the Special Fathers Network for a free consultation.
There is perspective that comes with experience, and I try to spend time with other dads as well. That's one reason I love the Special Fathers Network. There's a lot of dads that have kids older than mine. Just hearing their perspective is reassuring, that it'll be okay and, it'll work out. But, young dads need that reassurance as well. Just, being there to listen and encourage, I think, is important. We're all in different phases, too, with our kids. And so just being there to help as we can is part of the opportunity we have as special needs dads.
That's our guest this week, Al Feria. Al has 4 children, including John, who is autistic and nonverbal. Al works for One Collective, a not-for-profit helping integrate communities across the globe. And we'll hear his story on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Here's our host, David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
So let's listen in on this discussion between Al Feria and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Al Feria of West Caldwell, New Jersey, who's the father of 4 and who works for One Collective, a global Christian not-for-profit. Al, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to do it. I love the Special Fathers Network.
You and your wife, Nicole, have been married for 23 years and are the proud parents of 4, Joel 19, Emma 17, Elizabeth 14, and John 8, who has autism, is nonverbal, and diagnosed with intellectual delays. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
I was born near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I grew up in Detroit and the Metro Detroit area. When I was 19, we moved to New Jersey, and that's how I ended up first time in the Metro New York area. I did studies in New York and then in the Chicago area for a couple years, and when I was 26, I headed off to France to learn French to work in West Africa, actually, initially, and I ended up loving France and ended up going back to France, lived there 20 years total, and planned on living there a lot longer. Our youngest son, John, was diagnosed with autism 6 years ago at this time, and that led us to a major change in location and what I was doing career-wise, and our whole family ended up back in West Caldwell, our home for the last 6 years.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that brief flyby, but I want to go backwards a little bit. You grew up in Detroit for the most part, on your formative years, and I'm wondering, what is it that your dad did for a living?
My dad was a minister. He especially worked with young people, teenagers. He was my youth pastor as well when I grew up. And at one point, I was the president of the youth group, and he was the youth pastor. So sometimes we didn't see eye to eye on everything. But I appreciated his interest in me. He was there at many important points in my life. He came to all our games, my brother and I, very present in our lives. And I'm really thankful for his presence at our major events in life. He helped us with homework as well, helped me learn to multiply and be on time as well. So a lot of his priorities have become my priorities over the years.
Excellent. So I'm sort of curious to know, how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
My father is a very strong-willed person, and he got a little softer over time. But initially I was afraid of him because he came across sometimes as very hard as well. But we learned to talk to him. My mother said, go talk to your father when I get frustrated. And so I learned to do that. And we became good friends over the years. he was a confidant throughout my whole life. And over time, I got to be his confidant as well, and kind of checking up on him toward the end of his life. So he was a good model for me, a good mentor. I didn't always follow what he said, but I usually would ask him what he thought, even as an adult with decisions. And so he was very helpful in just getting a perspective of a father. Always said he loved us and was proud of us. So that was really important as well.
Well, it's great that you heard those words of affirmation, which is not so common from our dad's generation. Maybe more so today, but not so common then. In addition to the good work ethic that you talked about your dad having, I'm wondering if there's any other important takeaways from your relationship, something that comes to mind when you think about your dad.
Well, my dad, he was a youth pastor. And so at youth group meetings, and even younger, I would be with him. But he also was fathering these other young people, some of them who didn't really have good fathers at all. And so I saw in him kind of this fathering heart for young people. And even now, some of my peers from back in the 70s when we were young mentioned his influence on them, how he was like their father. And just the capacity to be a father figure for many different people, both your own children as well as other people. And that's something that is part of my ministry. I've had to help other people as well, besides my own children. And seeing that modeled in my father and my mother, who also was a big mother to a lot of other people, was helpful in my work now in having a heart for others beyond just my family. We always had people over outside the family as well. So just, having a house that was open to family, but also to outsiders who needed to be in family as well.
Excellent. So from what I remember, you went to the University of Michigan.
Yes, go blue.
You took a degree in computer science, and then you also went to Wheaton College as well.
Well, I went to University of Michigan for 2 years. I'm a big fan. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist saying go blue. My parents moved to New Jersey, and so I ended up doing what I thought was going to be 1 year of Bible training, and then I was planning on going back to Michigan. During that year, I ended up enjoying doing theology and feeling that my life call was changing from computer science to more of a Christian ministry type of emphasis. I ended up staying at my college for 2 more years, getting a degree in Bible and Christian ed. And then after a couple more years, I went to Wheaton Graduate School in Chicago land, did a master's in intercultural studies and missions. And when I finished that, I was about 26, and that's when I headed off out of the U.S. to learn French in France.
Well, that sounds like quite a interesting course. So you went from the U.S. when you're mid-20s to France, and I think you mentioned earlier it actually took you to the Ivory Coast and Africa as well.
Yes, that was my original where I was going to go. So I had to learn French. I didn't have any French before. I ended up in the French Alps 1 year, and then my second year in the Paris area, focusing on learning French. And while in France, I just really connected with the French culture. I worked with young people in the U.S. before, and in France, I was hanging out with teenagers, doing some youth ministry with very bad French, but they still enjoyed being around me, and I enjoyed being around them. It's funny, some of them are like in their 40s now. The teens I worked with were still friends, and they helped me learn French youth culture and ministry, so it was a good experience. I went on to Ivory Coast for a couple years to the city of Abidjan and worked there, but I never could get the French bug out of my system. And so after I did my 2 years in West Africa, I ended up going back to America for a year and then ended up heading back to France permanently in 1993.
And from what I remember, I think you'd mentioned that you and Nicole met in France. So the biggest takeaway from France is that you got married, right?
Yes, that was a few years later.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in France doing different ministry stuff, and then I met Nicole 4 years later on a church retreat in the middle of nowhere in France. It really was way out in the boonies in France. She's from South Dakota, and she had just been to France for a month, and we met on this retreat, and we got married 9 months later. Yeah, this past Sunday was our anniversary. We've been married 23 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So let's switch gears and talk about special needs. on a personal level and then beyond. So before John's diagnosis, did you or Nicole have any experience with the special needs community?
Really, no. I knew nothing basically about special needs. And so when John got diagnosed with autism in summer 2014, 6 years ago, when we got the diagnosis, we really didn't know what that meant because we knew nothing about autism and nothing about special needs world. We did some research and others researched for us about autism, and we realized we needed to stay at least a year in America for him to get early intervention. He was just under 3, and so for his future, he really needed specialized training. We discovered in France that they don't do very well with special needs, particularly autism as well. And so during our first year back, John was getting great training, and we realized that we needed to stay more long-term in the U.S. and that our season in France, which for me was 20 years, that long, wonderful season was coming to an end very quickly. John was in school. We were going to meetings and learning about autism. And while there, we got into the community of parents of special needs. We got involved in a church that had a really good special needs ministry as well, supporting families. And we realized how needy families are with disabilities, how much support they need, not just the one with the disability, but the parents and the siblings and all that. And so during that first year, we just got a huge education about special needs and the special needs world. And out of that, we ended up staying in America. And over time, for me, the next year, learning more about disability and the need for more support for disability, particularly from churches. And so that became my focus more and more, was discovering what's happening and learning how to support others. And so it's been a huge learning curve the last 6 years, but it's been wonderful connecting with people I never would have met before. There's so many wonderful people doing special needs work, from the ones working with the children, physical therapists and occupational therapists, and many of them are good friends now. I actually did a photo op of a wedding recently for a friend who was one of John's aides for a couple years, and so I ended up taking photos for them at their wedding. So I was honored to be one of the few non-family that was there, and also to honor them by taking pictures for them.
Very cool.
So we have many great friends, parents, workers, and then just others doing it around the country too.
Well, thanks for sharing. One of the things that I remember you telling me is that you'd spent 20 years in France. All 4 of your children were born there. And when John was 2 is when you got the diagnosis, and you've moved to the States because there's better resources and services, for his benefit as well. And I'm wondering, was there some meaningful advice you got either while you were still in France or when you got back to the States that's helped you, be on a little bit stronger path?
I remember a friend, our first year when we were back, he was saying, well, you made a good call. You made the right call for your family. We'd been in France. All our kids were born there, and we weren't expecting to leave. I knew it would take something really radical to get us out of France, probably, something really bad. And so, but I didn't expect it to be the way it arrived there. And so just learning to go with the flow, it was a huge change for us, and just trusting that Father God had good things for our family, for John as well. And just seeing what was going to happen out of that. So many people important to us now have come out of disability. And so we wouldn't have, ever done what we're doing without John having autism. And so I'm not sure, how you say we're thankful he has it. We wish in many ways that he could talk with us and things like that. But the path that we're on now, we're thankful that we're on it, and we wouldn't have done it without John having autism, basically. So, just trusting, that God has a plan and nothing is an accident that happens. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's still tough. There's really hard days with John sometimes, but I think we're a lot stronger, my wife and I, because of that. And we're able to be more help to people because of having to battle through things ourselves. So just that, nothing's a surprise, and God does have plans. Even the difficult things He's using to shape us and to get us where we need to be.
Well, thank you for sharing. What a great testimony to relying on your faith. I'm sort of wondering, was there some important decisions you made early on that have, again, put you on this path, this more positive path that you're on?
Yeah, definitely. I remember the first year, we prayed, God, would you heal John? Healing means take the autism away, we were thinking. And being angry and frustrated, the 5 stages of loss, we were going through denial and anger and all that stuff. But then coming to a realization that, that there was a plan somehow for it. And rather than asking that, be taken away, trying to discern what we were to do with the autism that John had and how we could help others as well. And so when we began thinking outside the box about his situation and just the opportunities that it provides as well, that was a whole different way of seeing things. And, it's still difficult. And sometimes we wish, he didn't have autism for sure. But seeing great opportunities that have come out of it, we're thankful now that we came out of France when we did. Our other 3 typical kids probably needed some support that they weren't getting there as well. And so they're all thriving now. The last 6 years in America, it's been challenging at times for them, but they're doing pretty well now. One just graduated high school, one's a senior, and one's in 9th grade. But yeah, overall they're doing well, and we're thankful, that as a family, we've gotten through this, and they've learned also about autism. As siblings, they've had their own challenges. We're not always as present, perhaps, if John didn't have his challenges, but special needs siblings have to grow up faster, I think, in many ways. So they've had to face stuff that other children their own age haven't had to face. And hopefully that helps them when they're older, some of the extra strength and lessons they've learned and are learning at this point through their younger brother, John.
Well, thank you for emphasizing that. I admire your authenticity and transparency about the challenge that goes along with, not raising just a child, but 4 children like you have, and then the impact that it has or can have on the rest of the family, you and your wife, your marriage, the siblings, John's siblings. And, it's not a straight line, right?
Oh, not at all.
A lot of moving pieces, and you just have to keep everything moving forward and, put your faith in God that, you're making the right decisions on a day-to-day basis so you don't look back and have many regrets, not any regrets, but many regrets about, the decisions you made with the information you had at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's organizations that come to mind that have been good supports for your family or that have been good support for John for that matter.
Absolutely. Yes. And again, we knew of one of them before, but the others we didn't know of. And it's been really good connecting with these different groups and becoming peers with their leaders. And they've helped us get through and getting through things. One of them is a group called Johnny and Friends. Johnny and Friends was begun about 40 years ago by Johnny Erickson Tada. She was 17 when she had a diving accident in Maryland. She became a quadriplegic because of that. And out of her struggles and growth and all that, she started an organization that helps people with disabilities. And we've been to some retreats they have in Pennsylvania. We've been to 4 of them already. That really helped us to understand the importance of siblings, getting our other kids supported. They have these 5-day retreats that I highly recommend for families. They give spiritual support. They have wonderful food and groups connecting with other people. They have some fun talent nights and dances and things like that. So it's been good for our family as a whole to attend Johnny and Friends family retreats. They also have some good broadcasts and some books on it as well. Another group is called Key Ministry that's based in Cleveland, the Cleveland area. And they have some great resources to help families with physical disabilities, but also mental disabilities, hidden disabilities. You know Dr. Steve Gersovic, who I think you've interviewed already. He's a wealth of information on mental health, and I rely highly on Key Ministry. I meet with them at least once a week for a special needs ministers gathering that I do with them. They do, I join. There's a group in Florida called Nathaniel's Hope, and you've interviewed Tim Cook before, I believe, as well. It's named after their son, Nathaniel, who was born with a disability, died at a young age. They help develop respite programs for churches. There's a great need for families to get respite, and they try to help churches develop a monthly program, a 3-hour block of respite, both for the special needs child and for the siblings. So we actually are in a couple of different buddy breaks, they call them, in New Jersey, and we get breaks there. That's a great group. One group I work with, I actually just finished a retreat with them, is Young Life, and the special needs branch is called Capernaum. That's for 14 to 22-year-olds with disabilities, and it's a whole support network for families. We did a 3-day retreat, just finished today. It was online too, which I wondered how an online retreat would go, but it was really good. They had some great resources that Young Life had provided for all their clubs, and just good connecting. We actually did a meetup time yesterday at 2 churches with some games. People were in cars driving by, but they got to throw balls at things and got some snacks and things like that. So those are some of my favorite young people, are the youth in Capernaum. Next to my own kids, I think they're my favorite kids in New Jersey. So those are 4 groups. The school that our son is a part of, it's called Spectrum 360. I think there's 400 families connected with that. They've been super supportive the last 5 years. Our son's been there. We go to parent support groups, and it's just been helpful to be part of a larger network of families in New Jersey that are all having, kids with with autism in particular, but some other ones too. And just to feel part of something bigger, so that, for having a hard time, there's others that are going through it, and we connect with them. So those are some of the groups that have helped us. There's others as well. It's growing, the number. I should say our church, Liquid Church in New Jersey, has been a huge support to us. And so we're thankful for them. When we were meeting in person before the pandemic, our son would have a buddy every Sunday, an adult or teen that would be with him during the service in the family area, so that our family could attend services. Night to Shine, too. That's by the Tim Tebow Foundation. It's a prom for 14 and older with disabilities. We've helped a bunch of them, I think 5 or 6 in different churches. And it's like the guest is like the king or queen for the night, and they get crowned, and there's a wonderful meal and dancing and all that. So Night to Shine is one of my favorite organizations. My son's not old enough to go yet, but when he is, I'm sure we'll have him go. And it just, there's over 100,000 guests every year that go around the world. So it's an amazing event that really honors people with disabilities. So those are a few.
Well, you've done an amazing job, Al, of summarizing many of the organizations that the Special Fathers Network has been connected to, just in the order that you mentioned them. Johnny and Friends, Steve Bundy, as a senior guy there. He was a podcast interview way back when. You mentioned Nathaniel's Hope that does this respite work. And Tim Cook is just a great advocate, he and his wife, Mary. And then in Cleveland, you mentioned Key Ministry with Dr. Steve Gersovic, who does some amazing work with families raising a child or children with disability. And Young Life Capernaum, my point of contact there is Pan Harmon.
Oh, yes.
And John Wagner is the fellow that we interviewed for the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. And the Tim Tebow Foundation's been a great advocate for all things disability and has made some really key introductions as well. So it seems like we've been overlapping unknowingly for years and years, but it's great to be able to give them each a shout out. So let's switch gears and talk about the work that you do with One Collective. And as I understand it, One Collective is a global not-for-profit that works in communities around the world and is passionate about making sure that no one is invisible and everyone has access to food, freedom, and forgiveness. I'm sort of curious to know, how did you get involved and what is it that you do with One Collective?
My wife and I have been with One Collective since 1998, so it's been 22 years. In 2014, John was diagnosed with autism, which led us back to the U.S., and we weren't quite sure what we were going to do, honestly, back in the U.S. But then the special needs world became very important to us, and I saw how much need there was for more work with special needs families. And I proposed to One Collective trying that out in New Jersey, in the New York area, and they gave me permission to try that out. And so I started working in the New York area, like with Capernaum and some other groups here. A couple years ago, I was in Athens, Greece at a world conference we had. We call them catalysts, our team leaders. And I discovered other teams were doing different initiatives with disability as well. We had people working in Albania at the time and in Mexico and other places. And so at the end of that conference, of course, I had asked if people were doing disability work. And I proposed to our organization to help coordinate it, and they accepted that possibility. So I still work in the New York area as a catalyst, trying to bring things together with disability in this area, but also more globally, trying to help initiatives happen in other places, both in the U.S. and around the world. I was in Querétaro, Mexico, just before the pandemic this year with two teams. One works with people who are hard of hearing, and the other one with a school for autism. And so I was excited to see both of their works. There's some great work starting out in Ukraine, in Uzhhorod, I'm butchering the name, with a housing project and respite and things like that, and other places too. So I'm trying to help facilitate what my colleagues are doing, get more people with One Collective looking at the disability world as well. And so I'm trying to bring some of our leaders together with One Collective to do more disability work. And so I'm thinking globally, but I'm also thinking New York-wise as well. With the pandemic, there's been a lot of gatherings since March of special needs leaders trying to figure out what to do. None of us had done virtual ministry before, but the pandemic forced a lot of things to go Zoom. And so it's been surprising what's developed. I've been on these roundtables weekly with different leaders around the country. And so that's given me more connection with other leaders in the U.S. And so I'm excited to see what comes out of that as we advance forward. The new normal, who knows what that's going to look like, but things are changing and they don't look different. It's a blessing in some ways for people with disabilities that churches have had to go virtual, because some churches have said they would never do online ministry, have had to do it. For people with disabilities that often can't make services, sometimes they physically cannot get into a building, there's opportunities to attend that aren't even there. And even globally, like Willow Creek is by Chicago by you, they have a special friends ministry that I watch with my son almost every week that wasn't online before, but I watch that. And so I'm able to connect with what's going on good in other parts of the country besides New Jersey.
Yeah, well, what I love about what you're talking about, and I admire the work that One Collective does, is that you've been able to pivot or shift, right? Where most of the services might have been in person, face-to-face, conferences, whatever. We've all had to adapt to this environment. We hope that it's temporary, but, candidly, the longer it goes on, maybe the stronger these virtual programs become, so that they're not just going to be the stopgap, right, and then back to whatever we were doing, but maybe this becomes part of the ongoing routine, right, to be more inclusive and accepting of people with all types of ability.
I think you're right. The conference that Special Fathers Network did earlier this year, that was my first connection with SFN. That was supposed to be at Willow Creek in Barrington, but because of the pandemic, it was online, and that was how I got to attend virtually. And I've been part of the biweekly dads gatherings every week since then. And so the pandemic has allowed resources to exist for people that weren't there before. Often I thought of special needs ministries like being more locally based, and it's important to be local. But because of the pandemic, there's resources, there's conferences and trainings and all that you can attend on your computer around the country and even around the world now that weren't possible. I hope that the pandemic somehow settles down some, but that the resources that are being made online will be able to continue online while being in person too. So perhaps there'll be some events that you can attend in person as well as attend from other parts of the U.S. and even world. So hopefully it's not, people don't just drop the online when things get back to in person, but they'll continue doing both. I think churches and ministries that pivot and do both, I think they'll have a greater chance of succeeding in this new world that we're in, this COVID world.
Yeah, well spoken. So I'm thinking about advice now, and I'm wondering if there's an important takeaway or two that you might be able to share with a young dad who might be closer to the beginning of his journey, raising a child with autism or just special needs.
Yeah, it's that news is a shock. I mean, I remember not really knowing what it was, but then as we understood, just really being in a funk for a while. And so it's hard, that initial diagnosis, definitely. All our kids are special. Our John he communicates in many ways without doing sentences, but he brings so much to our family, so much joy, and he's just fun kid. Not every kid is like that, but it just he adds to our family, definitely, and we've all learned through him. I know, just to try to appreciate what your kids have. It's easy to see their deficits, what they can't do, but to try to see what they can do and appreciate that, what they add to our families and to our neighborhoods and to our communities as well. At one point, I guess I thought they were more deficits, to be honest. We needed to help them, and I still think that. But, with my Young Life Capernaum kids, it was a blast getting to know them better the last 3 days and seeing what they can do, what they like to do, learning more about them. So just because there's we all have disabilities too, I think, so we're all weird in different ways. But the ones that it's more obvious with disabilities, they also have things they like to do and personalities and things like that. And to try to enjoy them for that and get to know them, just give others the opportunity as well. We're thankful, to be in an age where if John was born 20 years ago, it would have been a lot harder. But there are more possibilities right now for that. And, we pray that John will continue to thrive and have opportunities and become the person he should be and have opportunities to, for working and other things as he's able in the future.
Well, thank you for sharing. What started out as sort of a hard and a shocking experience, if I can paraphrase what you've said, has not morphed like it happened overnight, but has evolved to the point where, you just realize that it is what it is, and you're going to make the most of the situation and, celebrate the differences as opposed to thinking of the world in a deficit mentality, right? We wouldn't want to be defined by the things we couldn't do.
Right.
So why would we define other people by the things they can't do?
Absolutely.
So again, thanks for sharing. I'm sort of curious to know, Al, why is it that you've agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
In some ways, I feel I'm still learning. I became a dad at 40, and John was born when I was 50. So, I was an older guy when I became a dad. And I've only really been a special needs dad for 6 years, more when we knew he had a diagnosis there. But I think, there's a perspective that comes with experience, and, still, I have teenagers still. So, I'm getting through the adolescent stage and getting into college and all that. But there is perspective that comes with experience, and I try to spend time with other dads as well. That's one reason I love the Special Fathers Network. There's a lot of dads that have kids older than mine. Just hearing their perspective is reassuring, that it'll be okay and, it'll work out. But young dads need that reassurance as well. Just, being there to listen and encourage, I think, is important for, all of us going through this journey. We're all in different phases too with our kids. And so just being there to help as we can is part of the opportunity we have as special needs dads.
Well, thanks for being involved. We're thrilled to have you. And it's not lost on me that you do only have 6 years of fathering a child with special needs, even though you're more seasoned just by virtue of the fact that you got started a little bit later than average as far as having a family yourself. And what I love about your heart is that even though you have a limited amount of experience yourself, you're putting yourself out there to make yourself available to a younger dad, and you've acknowledged that, hey, there's other dads that have, 2, 3, 4 times the amount of experience in the special needs community than I do. There's a thing or two to be learned. And that's the whole idea behind the Special Fathers Network. So again, we're thrilled to have you. Let's give a special shout out to our mutual friends at Willow Creek Church.
Woohoo!
The Special Friends Program, John Fellegeller and Dr. Steve Gersovich of Key Ministry for helping connect us as well.
Yes, I appreciate all those guys. Dr. Gersovich, even though he's from Ohio State and he's a Buckeye, I still appreciate him. And we have some fun rivalry between us there. But he's a brilliant man, brilliant, especially during this pandemic. All the stuff he's helped the church with COVID-19 and mental health is invaluable for sure.
Agreed. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up, Al?
Well, thanks very much for this opportunity, David. I really appreciate the Special Fathers Network. I actually sent in a gift last week. I don't know if you got it in the mail yet, but I appreciate the training I consider I'm getting through the bi-weekly gatherings. Yeah, just being with the other men there. So thank you for getting that going and helping champion that cause. I'm thankful for that. And yeah, just glad to be here as part of the community. It's invaluable what we can learn from each other, and so it's a learning community. I think the Special Fathers Network, that's another reason I appreciate it very much. So thank you for what you're doing and for championing this cause, which I believe is very important.
Well, thank you for those kind words. If somebody wants to learn more about One Collective or contact you, how would they go about doing that?
One Collective is www.onecollective.org. The New Jersey project, I oversee that one. My email is Alcoleparis, ALCOLE, and Paris, PARIS, @gmail.com.
Okay, we'll be sure to include the website address for One Collective and your email address in the show notes as well. Al, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Al is just one of the dads who is part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Al, thanks again.
Thank you, David. Take care.
And thank you for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, presented by the Special Fathers Network. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for fathers to support fathers. Go to 21stcenturydads.org. That's 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. The Dad to Dad podcast was produced by Couch Audio for the Special Fathers Network. Thanks again to Reuben Law for supporting the Dad to Dad podcast. Call Reuben Law at 847-279-7999 and mention the Special Fathers Network for a free consultation.